Greetings, my friends. Mike Wan here, and today is December 31st, 2023, New Year's Eve. I guess it's not the Eve yet. It's been a while since I have done one of these videos, and considering the place where we are in the solar cycle and the calendar cycle, it seems appropriate to maybe do a catch-up, a year in review. So that's what we got going on here. You can see, perhaps you can see in the background, I'm no longer in Florida. Returned back to Pennsylvania in the middle of December, and coincidentally, yeah, I guess coincidentally, though. I don't think of it as coincidence at all. But the point I'm trying to make is it wasn't planned. The Christmas holiday was spent in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Christy and I were doing a house sit for about a week. Oh, and that covered the Christmas season. So I was in Bethlehem for Christmas. And I want to begin this, I guess, by pointing out the perfection of the timing and the experiences of how this year is coming to an end for me. And this has been a most unusual year in the life of Mike Wan. So we returned from Florida, 72 days in Florida. In those 72 days, I think we stayed in 11 different places. We were primarily house sitting, living as nomads, whole bunch of other stuff going on. But being in the energy of Florida, of the Floridian mounds, I've talked about that in the previous videos, and we come back to Pennsylvania. We arrive in Bethlehem right at the beginning of the final stages of the Christmas season. And, you know, we're regular people with regular families and who do regular things. And we ended up doing Christmas Eve with Christy's family. And after that, we had, there's friends of ours who live at something which is called Camp Hill Villages, or it's a Camp Hill Village. It's Camp Hill Village - Kimberton, Pennsylvania. They're Camp Hill villages, I think, throughout the United States and in Europe, primarily, I think, in like Britain and Scotland and all those, in the British Isles. And these are villages which are working farms based upon Rudolf Steiner biodynamics, but also provide a lifestyle, places to live for adults with mental disabilities. And we have friends who live there, who are part of like the infrastructure, run the farm and that sort of stuff. And they invited us to the annual event. And all of Camp Hill, the Camp Hills have a very, very strong Steiner influence. And on New Year's Eve, the tradition is to go to the dairy farm and to sing Christmas carols to the cows. And when Christy first said, like, hey, let's go do this, on Christmas Eve, I wasn't jumping up and down to do that. Primarily because I knew it was going to be a long day before that of Christmas Eve, and I didn't necessarily want to do that, but I'm really glad I did. It turned out to be a really special sort of event for me. So what it was a dairy farm where all the cows were. It's an organic dairy farm, and there are probably about 36 cows, and it's, they're I don't know if you've ever been to like a dairy farm, but it's kind of messy, it smells, it's dark, it's damp, and so forth. And probably about 100 people came and encircled the cows who were in, I don't know what the stalls, they weren't stalls because they're not individualized, but they couldn't walk, they weren't walking around freely. And for probably about 90 minutes, sang Christmas carols. There was books handed out and people were singing. And it was like, so I was able to look at the experience from a couple different lenses. So like the first lens was like the actual experience of Christmas Eve and a whole bunch of people there singing to the cows, and they're singing Christmas songs. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever been around cows, but like when the cows relieve themselves, when the cow pees, it sounds like someone's pouring out a bucket. So they're singing, and you could hear like all of a sudden like cows pissing all over the place. And because there is, you know, a portion, I'd say like maybe 10%, 15% of the people who were there were you know, developmentally challenged, there would be all of the signs of being around a bunch of developmentally challenged adults. Wait till that noise disappears. And so what that would be like yelps or like, you know, seemingly inappropriate shouts throughout it. So there's this Christmas carol, we're in this setting, and there's cow piss, and there's shouting. And at the same time, it was the purest, like, Christmas experience I can remember having. Like, it's not about, like, you know, the commercialism of Christmas. It wasn't even about like the Christmas story as much as it was about like people coming together, and they were singing, and it was really, really, you know, it was a moving experience. Like I was there. I was like, this is a special, you know, a special event. It felt like a really nice earmark to end the year. But then on top of that, within like Steiner biodynamic farming, a cow has a very important role within the farm. And I'm not an expert of biodynamics, so I can't really speak to it, but I know that is part of it. I know, like, one of the things they do, like, annually they'll take a cow horn and they fill it with manure and they bury it somewhere in the farm, and it does something with, it's called the cosmic cow, and it deals with bringing down cosmic energies and infusing those cosmic energies within the land where the food is grown and where the farm takes place. So I knew that there was that level of spiritual quality in play. And then from an astrotheological perspective, so astrotheology is more or less understanding all of the world's religions are allegorical tellings of the movements of the heavens, and from where we get the idea of like the age of Aquarius or the age of Pisces, that comes from an astrotheological perspective. And an age, you know, that's a common concept right now. I've talked about it myself here before, like the age of Aquarius and the age of Pisces and all of that. But within every age, an age usually lasts about 2,000 years, and there is, within the worldwide culture during a particular age, there is a symbol of that age, which is usually the Savior. So the most obvious one for us being the age of Pisces, which is said to correspond with the Christian era, where the symbol, the Savior, the symbol of the sun is the sun, is Jesus Christ. And his symbol is that of the fish. And so that corresponds with Pisces, because Pisces is the two fishes and stuff like that. And so other astrotheological, allegorical examples would be like in the Old Testament, the story of Moses coming down from, I think it's Mount Sinai, where he talked to the burning bush. And when he came down, he saw that all of the Israelites were worshiping a golden calf, and he destroys the golden calf. And then maybe sacrifices a ram, then blows the ram's horn. Maybe I'm getting those details a little bit confused, but the symbols are there, like the ram's horn and the ram and the calf. Those are astrotheological symbols, like where the ram horn is a reference to the age of Aries, which is the period of time or the age before the age of Pisces, and Aries is it's a ram, and then before that would be the age of Taurus, and Taurus is a bull, but a bull and a cow are often interchangeable. And so when we go to the Vedic period or ancient India, where cows were venerated as, they were the savior, the symbol of that age, just as Jesus was in Pisces and the ram was in age of Aries, that us in front of going back to the Kimberton Christmas Carol, where everyone was recognizing Christmas, which is, in the modern context, like an astrotheological story of the birth of Jesus, corresponding with the winter solstice. We were singing Christmas carols to a previous age's savior symbol. And from astrotheological perspective, whether it's Jesus or whether it's the cow or whether it's something else, they're all symbols of ultimately the sun. So I was aware of that element also with what was going on in Christmas Eve. So this Christmas Eve experience was really, really, it was a meaningful experience for me. So this is just kind of like the beginning of the story. So the 12 nights, the 12 days of Christmas, I think it's 12 days of Christmas. Yeah, like the partridge and the pear tree. This is an ancient story. Like before it was called Christmas, there was a recognition that you would celebrate these 12 days. And the 12 days would begin at sundown following 3 days after the winter solstice. So the winter solstice being December 21st, in our calendar. And what is said to happen is the sun does not move. Where the sun rises from the horizon, every day it shifts a little bit. The sun is said to move more or less 1 degree. That's modern measurement, but 1 degree every day. And there's this movement. In the ecliptic, it moves 1 degree, and we can see a change within where the sun rises in the horizon and all sorts of stuff like that. But what is part of all of the stories related to this time of year and embedded in the Christmas story is the idea of how for 3 days the sun does not rise. So after the winter solstice, the sun is thought to more or less be dead for 3 days, and then on 3 days after that, on the next morning, the sun moves again, and that is the birth of the Savior. That's the birth of Jesus, of the Son, of all of these things. So that is part of the story. And before our modern version of telling that story, when it was more of this kind of and I'm using this in the most general term, the pagan story, they'd recognize the pagan perspective, they'd recognize there's the winter solstice, and then there'd be 3 days of stillness of the sun, and then you would begin the celebration. The celebration is when the sun begins to move, and that is Christmas. So within this culture, within this understanding, what would happen is at sundown of what we're now calling Christmas Eve, or December 24th, 3 days after the 21st, or the solstice, that is when a 12-day pageant of merriment, the 12 days of Christmas begins. And during this time period, that's when you have all type of merriment. And at least the way I understand it, or from what the research I've read, and all it is research. I don't know how true it is, but it's the best I got. Is the idea was during this time period from right after the winter solstice until, I guess what we're going to call Christmas Eve. So 3 days after the winter solstice begins this 12-day period. There is the merriment, because that is when it is the darkest, when the energies of our realm of life on earth are most imbued with darkness. And it's not necessarily a denial of the importance of darkness, of that part of the cycle of life, that's why we bring the merriment, or the merriment would occur. But it's mostly like people need to embody solar energy, or light energy, lightness, merriment during this time period, as to maybe not become completely overwhelmed by the darkness. So anyway, the conclusion of the 12 days is in our calendar system would be January the 5th. And so as I'm recording this during New Year's Eve, we're in the middle of the supposed traditional 12 days of Christmas. Excuse me. Quick asterisks to the story right now. For those of you who are familiar with some of the work I've done in looking into Francis Bacon, go and do some research into Francis Bacon. He did a play which was performed, I think, in 1594. It was a 12-day of Christmas, 12-day of Christmas pageantry. It was called The Prince of Purple and the Knights of the Helmet, and all of that was allegorical to goddess worship. And point being is these traditions are embedded into our modern culture, and particularly as Francis Bacon is the architect of our modern world, as the father of the scientific method and modern English and so forth. So point being, they have that was the 12 days of Christmas was still a practice, ritual, and celebration, and part of the beginning of this age which we're living in, or this paradigm, this time period. So anyways, where am I going with all this story? So last night, so we were in Bethlehem until I think the 27th, and then from there we returned back to the River House. The River House is the house where we had the tent, and we stayed in. There's the tent you can see right there. We're not in the tent right now. We're in the house. You can see the house behind us. House built in the 1800s. So friggin' weird. But anyway, so we're down here, and a friend of mine who I hadn't seen for a while said that he was performing with some other musicians at a bar. And so Christy and I didn't have anything to do last night. So we're like, let's go out and we're going to go see our friend perform. And so we go out there, and I see another friend of mine who I hadn't seen for a while, who came to see the music as well. And this guy is also very involved with this idea of biodynamic farming. He's got a regular job. I think he's a documentary filmmaker. He once was making documentaries for PBS and NPR, on that level of documentary film. Still kind of grounded in mainstream, but mainstream alternative, if you will. These are all just continuums, places where we all are, where we find ourselves living in this time, in this paradigm. So my friend is not only a regular job kind of guy, but he's also a serious student of Rudolf Steiner. I don't consider myself a serious student of Rudolf Steiner at all, but a lot of that work shows itself up in my life over and over again. And so this is another example. So my friend, when I see him, I haven't seen him for a while, he's like, listen, what are you doing on January 6th, which is Three Kings Day, which is the day after the 12th day of Christmas, or the 12 days of Christmas. So the 12 days of Christmas ends on January 5th, and January 6th is Three Kings Day. And we can go and see how all of the Christmas symbology ties in over and over again. So we've got Three Kings Day, and it's been said that the three kings are the belt of Orion, the three stars of Orion. That's one of the interpretations. But anyway, so he says, can you come to my biodynamic farm, and will you participate in the alchemical making of the solution, where you take frankincense, myrrh, and gold, and you do some sort of mixture with water, and then you walk the farm and you spray with a bough of a pine tree, and you almost like what I think they do this in Catholic churches. They'll put the pine tree in the water and sprinkle the water as you walk the land. And he asked me to participate in the making of that. And again, I'm no farmer, I'm no Steiner guy, but I was invited to this, and also incorporated in, as I said, in the biodynamic farming, is this cosmic cow idea. In fact, it was my friend, the same friend who was telling me about this years and years ago. That's how I know about it. The filling of the cow horn with the cow manure, and you bury it. This is all part of that same sort of process. And so the point of me sharing this story with you is showing after the completion of this strangest of years for me, I found myself in this 12-day of Christmas esoteric celebration, being in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, singing to the cows, and in the Kimberton Camp Hill Village on Christmas Eve, and marking the beginning of the 12-day of Christmas pageantry, and then concluding that with going to my friend's farm, and he's probably just 15 minutes from where I am right now, and participating in the making of this, this magical elixir. And that to me is just one more indication of what's going on. What is this structure which is underlying the mundane reality. I'm using my life as an example, but it's true for all of us, particularly for those of you who are paying attention to these stories, who find this interesting. This is true for all of us. There's something of great order and resonance and ceremony and ritual, which is, driving this bus, if you will. So I'm going to go and do that. And, he's going to go, I don't know any of the details of what he's going to do, but I'm going to bring a glass jar of Susquehanna River water. And whether or not I'm able to do the same thing which he is doing with his water for his farm with the Susquehanna River water, or for him to just mix a little bit of that water in the Susquehanna River water. I'll see how that unfolds, but that's what my intention in going there to do. And this is it's the beginning of calendar year 2024 for me and what is to come. And so I'm ending this past year, this 2023, in this kind of soft, hidden ritual, if you will. And it's really it's beautiful. I said I was moved, I was moved by that cow experience, and looking at all of these events and having that energy inside as the next year begins. And the reason why I'm sharing that, that sentiment which I'm feeling inside, is because the previous 2 years, particularly if you've been, sticking around since the beginning of the collapse after the Freemasonic presentation in January 2022, it's been a redirection a slow redirection, a destruction of an old way of being, and a discovery, a rebirth of a new way of being. You know, I'm sharing my personal story, but I think it's a reflection of an entire generation of people. I think primarily Generation X. You know, these are the people who are probably feeling it the most. But then also a movement in terms of like where our world is unfolding, and particularly for those of us who are purposefully going in a direction different than what is being laid out before us, and finding through, you know, community, through like sharing our stories with you know, finding the others, like there's something else which is guiding or moving this. So because it's the end of the year, because it's, you know, December 31st, I wanted to take a moment to kind of like recap, for me at least, what this past year has been. And where I've seen it the most, beginning in 2022, I moved out of like my very normal, structured living. You know, I was a normal guy living in a normal house. Like, I mean, never like normal, but I lived a lifestyle. And when I moved out of the house which I was living in and moved to Baltimore, I began this process of becoming nomadic and, you know, kicking and screaming all the way along. And this was the year, this past, you know, that began in 2022. In 2023 was when I really, you know, I got my feet wet. I began 2023 in a farmhouse, living in a farmhouse, still kind of like a normal life, but a farmhouse built in the 1700s. And then in June, moved out of that farmhouse and then started went on a 33-day cross-country journey, more or less camping, living out of a tent, living out of a car, few Airbnbs, visiting people who I knew, friends, staying with them, but having an experience. And I put out a video upon my return at the end of the summer, going through all of the strange things that happened. Maybe I'll make reference to what I think is the most intriguing part of that later on in this video, and that being the Forrest Gump synchromistic event. But anyway, so I returned back after that 33 days on the road, and that was brand new for me. I never had 33 days on the road, living in a car, and what that was like, and came back and spent all of August. Actually, no, from there I went up to Maine, came back, and then I spent the remainder of August and September living in a tent. This tent right here. Showed you guys that bell tent. And then after that, moved down to Florida, where it was 72 days in Florida. And that was a little bit different than living in the car and living in and moving around that way, because those 72 days was primarily defined, at least living-wise, through house sitting. Like, it's a whole thing if you're not familiar with it, but like there are platforms out there where you can become a house sitter. Technically, it's not really, I mean, you're house sitting, you're staying in other people's houses, but you're really taking care of their pets. That's like what it's about. And you come in and you stay in someone's house and you're living in their house and you're caring for their pets. And 11 different places in 72 days, and stayed in typically some really nice places. And it was just this fascinating experience of moving into another house, another place where people live, and feeling that energy and that lifestyle, and then moving around. It was very, very nomadic, but it was also grounded. And I made quite a few videos cataloging that time period, and particularly the land of Florida and the mounds. And I talked a lot about death. I was there during Halloween, and I told a story of a strange encounter where I met someone who was cousins with my babysitter when I was a child, who died when he was my babysitter. So there was like death stuff. Someone who I'd always been curious about, this babysitter. I knew that this young man who babysat me died, and that was a big enough story in my family that my parents told that to me numerous times growing up, and I played with that, the babysitters. I inherited his toys, and I always knew that this was this dead babysitter. And then finally to kind of go and meet his cousin in the most random place during the Day of the Dead, all sorts of stuff. So death was a big theme in Florida. And if you watch the video of the trip going out west, there was a big death theme, particularly as it related to New Mexico and a cemetery in New Mexico, and the release of the movie Oppenheimer, and the famous quote which Oppenheimer says in the movie, "I am death," which is, from the Vedics, holy cow, all of that sort of stuff. So death shows itself again and again throughout this year for me, death and moving about and nomadic. At the same time, the discovery that my birth name, which I've always been associated with, or associated with our birth name, Mike Wan, actually, it had very deep synchromystic meaning. Mike Wan is the phonetic, and, I guess depends, I've seen a couple different spellings, but one of the spellings matches my name, Mikwan, is an Algonquin word meaning feather. And it's what they called William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania. Just so many strange things. And as I began to look at all of the actual events of the changing of my life, and look at it from like an actual experience level, but then a synchromistic level, and seeing how tightly woven all of this was, it allowed me even more so to become more comfortable with allowing a certain part of me to die, right? What is the death? I didn't die. I'm still here, right? But part of me did die. Mike Wan became Mike Wan. And I find that very, very funny. Like, it's that subtle. It's that subtle. It's like it's seemingly the same, but it's totally different. And all of this corresponds with that story, which I told you in the beginning of this video, like this perfect alignment with the 12 days of Christmas. And so this is the springboard, which, I'm on as I begin the next year. So I started 2023. It was actually me and Christy. We started 2023, and we're really leaning heavily, talking about a lot in both our own podcast together, like just the audio one, but then also the videos I was making about arrow circulation and Abaris, the nomadic Mongolian shaman, and like. So I want to go and read this quote. I've read it probably multiple times, but I read it every morning now when I get up. I have it written here inside of my book. It's written right here. And it says, by definition, a new era cannot grow out of the dichotomies and structures of the past. The future must be created afresh by those who are able to journey into the undifferentiated ground that underlies being, and to bring back a new dispensation from the gods and the ancestors. This is the task of the Skywalkers. That's what Abaris was known as, Abaris the Skywalker, who visit heaven and the underworld and then become arrow circulators who cast a sacred circle round a land and consecrate it a new destiny. And so I've said throughout this year, like, that's what Christy and I are doing. We're arrow circulation. We're bringing the arrow. Mike Wan, the feather, the driver or the steerer of the arrow, like, that's occurring. And I was doing that, and I was figuring it out, and seeing what that actually looks like and feels like. And that was what 2023 was. And now as 2024 begins, I'm stepping into that even more so. Like last year was like, finding my way. And this year, I think it's going to be more established, like a greater knowing. In that quote, it says, the Skywalkers visit heaven and the underworld. And so heaven and the underworld, that's exactly what the sort of work which I talk about. When I talk about natural astrology, that's the undifferentiated ground. It's actually the firmament. The undifferentiated firmament. Natural astrology is the astrology without the stories of mythology. It's undifferentiated. And I began this December teaching my first natural astrology course. I did 5 classes. I'm 3 classes into it. 10 people signed up for it. And this is part of what this future is. Like for me, like this is what I'm going to be doing more and more so. And so I'm grateful for all of the people who have been interested in natural astrology as I've talked about it, and those who've signed up. But that's going to be more to come in 2024 as I am becoming more established within myself in terms of teaching these practices and these understandings of these undifferentiated understandings of the heavens. And additionally, the Skywalkers, they visit the underworld. And so mythologically, the underworld is tied to rivers. The river Styx is what one crosses to enter into the underworld. And so the Susquehanna River, as the oldest river on the planet, and one which has been marked in magical ritual to bring about our modern paradigm, all of the first computer and modern globalism tied to this river. By sharing the Susquehanna mystery, I'm bringing that undifferentiated story on these traveling circles in which we're doing. And so, in the most literal sense, like, that's what's happening. I don't consider myself the only Skywalker, the only arrow circulator. I think that this is a group of people who are doing this. And I would just suggest that all of the people who are watching this, there's a handful of you. The reason why this resonates is because this rings true to you in your journey as well. And so, I share my story as possible a way for you to see yourself in parallel as to what I'm sharing with you. And to also share with you, like, what's to come. I've learned a lot, like practically, like what works and what doesn't work. Like it's not easy to be on the road. One of the things which Christy and I have realized is like we need a home base. Like not having a home base has been very difficult. Doesn't have to be big or anything, but a structure more than a tent where we can have some degree of keeping things that are important with us when we're not moving about. That needs to be discovered. We need to acquire somehow in the coming year. So that is on the horizon. Additionally, like becoming more and more focused and more structured when we do our travels. As we do our travels, we did the starboard ceremonies. As we traveled, where we would show up, we would bring out the starboard, but going forward, we want there to be more structure around it, in anticipation of where we're arriving, where people are expecting to participate in these starboard ceremonies in which we do. We do them with groups and we do them individually. And the new year is beginning, is lining up just perfectly for that. On the 5th of January is the next house sit, and that is right outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and we'll be there for 2 weeks. And I have already begun, I think I have 4 or 5 structured events for Christy and I to do starboard ceremonies, then also a river and stars ceremony. That's the more formalized building of the starboard with people, but then also tying in the Susquehanna River. That's why I'm going to get that water and imbue it with a magical Three Kings solution. But this is going to be part of the future. I think I'm going to begin going back onto the broader podcasting circuit. I used to do a lot of podcasts. On December 2nd, actually I think it was like the 3rd, right around my birthday, I recorded an episode of Higher Side Chats. First time I'd been on the higher side for over 2 years, and more or less I told the completion story of the Corona ritual from Kobe Bryant's death until the the episode hasn't been released yet, but that is coming out shortly. And I don't know if I've gone through detail talking about it on any of these videos, but I think if you watch these videos, you're definitely going to appreciate what I've done on the Higher Side Chats. And I have a few other podcasts, larger platform podcasts lined up, which I'm going to be going on. And I'm going to continue to do that more and more. And what I'm going to be talking about is really these ideas which we share here, which is finding a new future outside of the technocratic dictatorship led by, Web 3.0 and all of that stuff. Something else. At the end of the day, what am I doing? When I look in the mirror and I contemplate, is like I'm just holding an energy. I don't have any expectations as to like any results. I'm like, the only thing which I can do, which I'm able to do, which I have control over, is to go around, teach natural astrology, do these ceremonies, and move about. In the most literal way, I am holding the energy of being in this paradigm and not of this paradigm. Of not having a permanent address, of all of these things that we've been so conditioned to be, but to hold something else, to prepare, to inspire, all of us inspiring each other along the way, for another future we can't even imagine yet of what it will be. So I guess that's where I'm going to begin wrapping this end of the year check-in with you guys. Is like, that's kind of where I am. And I need you all to also do this participation with me, whether or not that is a willingness to host an event, if you have the capability of doing that. Whether that's in your house or you're part of a community wherever you live, if you could reach out to me and say, hey, this is open to you, and maybe we can begin to plan something for 2024, that would be great, where you would be able to be the local feet on the street and we can do something together. That would be fantastic. Also, at December 31st, I need to bring in more starboard ceremonies. I need to bring in some money. I think I've got like $75 right now. The higher side chats always leads to a whole bunch of orders for me, and those orders are kind of how I'm able to pay for gas and eat and do that sort of stuff. But that hasn't been released yet. I thought it was going to be released about a week ago. So I'm in a little bit of a pinch right now. So if you guys are, if you're watching this, you're my top supporters. You're my community. I'm your community. If you've ever thought about having a starboard ceremony, now would be a great time to order one. It would really benefit me. Any sort of support, I'd greatly appreciate it. That being said, I'm very optimistic. I'm immensely optimistic. I just kind of described a dire situation. But there's no anxiety, which I feel inside. That's the beauty of being able to see the the structure that lies beneath the mundane reality is like you begin to have greater and greater faith in like there's something, there's something else at play. I don't know what that is, but I know it's there. And so that's not just for me, that's for all of us. And it is from that faith that we're able to kind of move away from the fear-mongering which they put out there and saying the modus operandi is to scare people and then say, oh, you're scared, here's your solution, go along with this path because you don't have anything else going on. We are able to go and discover the path together, temporarily through the mechanism of the internet, but long-term through face-to-face and actual human contact. So that being said, my friends, this is Mike Juan. It is 12/31/23, 3:46 p.m. coming out of York County, Pennsylvania. Till the next one. Take good care.